Alrighty, we are live. I hope. I had to check LinkedIn. Here we go. Again, an awkward moment of me looking down at my phone at the very beginning of a podcast. This makes for super engaging experience. I know, but it's LinkedIn's fault. So we're live. We are here. If anybody's out there, drop me a message in the comments. That would let me know that I'm not just shouting at my computer screen. In addition, oh man, Periscope temporarily down. What is up with that? All right, we're trying. Periscope, I'm sorry, we're trying. So if anybody has questions, I'd love to hear them. Love to get your comments and feedback on sort of whether this has been helpful. I know for the most part, lots of folks are starting to feel optimistic about 2021. I am as well. Hey there, I see a thumbs up from the San Diego Code School, so that's awesome. I am not alone. Thanks, Marcus. Appreciate it. So I'm starting to feel a sense of optimism and impending next year being an awesome time. Super excited about things that we've got planned for 2021, which includes not being under the Rona and instead sort of thriving and having an awesome time. So, hey there, Diego, Samita, it's good to see you. Super excited that I think more people are going to get hired in 2021. I think that's the jam. And so every week I jump online right around this time, 12 o'clock Pacific, and just answer questions that people will pose about the job search process, about how to land your first opportunity in tech. And I usually start with a little short something that happened over the course of the week or something that is, I think, sort of helpful or useful for people that are looking for work. And so today, I think one of the things that's been most on my mind recently is resumes. And so I mentioned a couple of things about resumes, and I'll just jump in and start answering questions. So if you have a question, feel free to drop it in the chat now. That way, when I get done with my little diatribe, then I can answer your questions and just keep it moving. I'll go for as long as we have folks until 1 o'clock. If the questions die down, then we'll hop off early and we'll jump back into real life. But as far as resumes are concerned, I think one of the key insights that I can share with folks that are trying to get their first opportunity in tech is to focus more on using the resume as a way to describe what your current state of strongest skills, the story, the narrative that you bring to the table in terms of what the baseline of your experience is, and not necessarily think that you've got to be able to have this resume that's going to win you the job and land you the job. And instead, it should just be kind of like a business card. Excuse me. And a business card is going to have basic contact information and give someone a little bit of context around why they should be having a conversation with you. Usually has like your credential, like you are a CEO or you're a software engineer, right? So your resume should be exactly that. It should be, this is what you're bringing to the table. Here are the basics. Here's some context around, should we have a conversation? It does not necessarily have to win you the opportunity. So don't feel like, hey, I don't have a lot of experience, so I need to pull off my previous experience. Like say you're a frontline worker and you're working in, let's say, restaurant space. So serving tables or you're a bartender, right? Any of those kinds of roles. Some people will say, well, I'm just going to leave those off my resume because I'm trying to go after a tech job. And when you're transitioning into tech, you don't have a lot of relevant experience that shows your work history, a deep amount of work history, 7 years of work history. So instead of pulling that off your resume, include it and make sure you're shaping the narrative when you describe your previous roles with things that are transferable skills. Right? So software engineering is a lot about communicating with people and helping them solve problems. And so same sort of things might happen in the restaurant business, right? So if you're out there waiting tables, you have to be able to, deal with change, right? The chef tells you we're out of fish. You got to be able to go out there and solve that problem for the guests and make sure the guests are happy with the solution that you've created, right? If you are in a situation where you drop some food, you got to recook it. You've got to be able to explain how you made a mistake and how you learned from that experience. And so there are going to be some qualities that you're going to be able to put on your resume that will highlight some of the transferable skills that you can use, even though you're going after a technology role. So think about it as a way for you to frame the conversation, talk a little bit about your experience, and highlight some of the strengths that you bring to the table, even if they're non-technical. Now, you want to highlight as many of the technical skills as you have in a clear and concise manner. So what I usually suggest is starting with a simple mission or goal statement. It could be one sentence, maybe two sentences, but eliminate the paragraphs. No one wants to read a book at the beginning of your resume. So one short sentence or two short sentences, that's it. That's your goal, and just talk about why, right? So your goal is to land a job working with front-end technology and adding value to a outdoor organization, right? So you want to build websites for camping companies or something, right? So that could be your goal statement, because you're going to submit a different resume for different jobs. So you might want to tailor that last for a blank company with for a healthcare organization, right? When you're submitting your resume for a healthcare job. So you want it to be authentic, but you also want to be somewhat custom. So you put your goal statement on there. Next, you're going to put the strongest piece of your experience or background towards the top. You're going to go strongest to weakest. So if you have a bachelor's degree, no matter what the subject area is, if it's here from the US, that goes to the top. So a US bachelor's degree, top of the resume. If you've got any other formal training in software engineering, because you're going after software engineering role, that goes to the top of the resume. Then you start looking at the other relevant experience, like maybe projects would be the next thing, if you don't have a lot of work history in software engineering. So put some of your projects, and then inside of the description for each of the projects, list out the technologies that you use on each project. I'm not a fan of putting them all together. So a big list of technologies all together at the top looks like a big blob, and it's not nearly as engaging as I built this tool that lets me do X, Y, and Z, and I learned X, Y, and Z, and I utilized this, and this technology. Perfect. Awesome. Love it. And then maybe a link to that project, either on your portfolio page or the live website, and then maybe a link to the GitHub repository. So you could even go and get some bit.ly shortened links to make it easy for people, if they're reading your resume, to actually type it in and get to your websites. So pro tip there, bit.ly links, shortened links to make it easier with descriptive names on them. So it's easy to see, bit.ly/roulette project, right? Boom. They can go to the website. They can check it out. Now, you're going to go strong to your weakest, and then you could put an interesting hobby or something, right? That's fine. It shouldn't take you to another page, right? So if you're at the end of 2 pages, you don't need to add a third page to put your hobby on there, right? But if you got enough room, you can put something down there. If it's interesting and if it adds some unique flair or value, awesome. You can throw that at the bottom. Nothing wrong with that. You never know. You might get super lucky. So if I put, hey, I'm an ultra distance cyclist, I've ridden a bunch of double centuries in California. If I find another cyclist, it'd be like, damn, beast mode with double centuries. And that could be your gatekeeper to getting into an opportunity, to a job. So it's okay. Show a little bit of your personality, your flair, as long as it's not crazy. So you've got your resume. Last thing I would suggest is make sure there's no spelling mistakes. Everything is formatted, consistent sizes, fonts, the appropriate size font, so it's easy to read, it's clear. The order of if you're going to list a bunch of things, if it's job and company, job, company, just make sure everything's consistent. It's super duper important. Not that you have a high volume on your resume. The most important factor that I look at when I'm looking at a resume is, does it look overall neat and well organized? And is it consistent? Because to me, that's a detail, that's a sign of what it will be like when you're working and you're looking at code. And if you can't put together a consistent resume, it's not likely you'll be able to write code that's consistent and that's readable and well maintainable. That's what you want to impart upon someone. Hey, everything's in order, well organized. This is a person that hasn't made any mistakes. And that's the key to your resume. It's not going to win you the job, but you could lose a job opportunity by having a bad resume. It might be passable. So it's like, all right, cool. Resume looks good. Let's check that box and move on to the next phase of screening the candidate. That's what you want. You want check the box as an entry-level developer. There's nothing you need to put on your resume that's going to be like bells and whistles, red flags everywhere. Like, we got to bring this guy in right now. This woman is going to be the greatest developer on our team. Hey, this person is like awesome. I can see in the resume they're going to be exact fit. That's not going to happen. So don't set your expectations there. Just set your expectations to, this is my calling card. It's going to look super professional and it will not eliminate me. And then you can move on, right? So resume is the first and most important thing that you should be putting together if you are starting your job search. If you're currently looking for a job and you haven't done all of that with your resume, you need to pause, stop looking, and fix the resume, because there's no point. It's kind of like when I was in the ad space. There's no point in buying ads and driving people to your site and then have a crappy landing page. It's your landing page. So you got to make sure the resume is a piece of collateral that you can hand out and confidently know you're not going to lose the opportunity if you give them that resume. At the very least, it will get you check mark on to the next phase of the process. So I'm going to pause there. I'm going to open up for questions. So if you have questions, feel free to drop them in the comment box. Also, you can shoot me an email. I'll check my email once or twice while we're doing this to see if anybody sends me anything. But yeah, more than happy to answer questions for folks that are potentially seeking some employment in 2021. Just drop them in the comment box, and then I will be more than happy to take a stab at answering the questions. Don't be shy. It's all right. This is a safe place. We're going to make sure everybody is well situated and ready for tackling whatever the challenges are in your job search. Wish I had like some little Jeopardy music while we wait. I'll have to cue that up. Oh, come on. No one has any questions? I know there's a little bit of a delay, so I have to kind of wait after I say it, and I have to wait for the responses, but there's got to be somebody out there that has some question about the job search process. If not, I'm going to go eat some KFC. It's lunchtime, so it's on you. You got to give me a question to keep me here in the seat. Nothing? Oh, man. I appreciate people following us on, looks like a couple people on Facebook. No one on YouTube, so that's point in YouTube. And Periscope, still being Periscope. Got 0 there as well. So, got a couple. Hey, Sonia Roberts, one of my favorite humans. I appreciate that you're watching me talk every Tuesday. All right, so we got a question, and that's awesome. I love that. This makes the process go way smoother. So, how would I say a resume and writing a LinkedIn profile should differ? LinkedIn only shows the first 2 lines for each position. Yeah, so LinkedIn tries to kind of keep everything sort of like tight and well formatted for you. And I haven't experienced the first 1 to 2 lines for each position. I know I have positions on mine, and I guess I gotta look and see. So this does not make interesting TV, I guess. But so I'm scrolling down. I can see a good amount for each. So maybe I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines, and then you have a see more button, right? So I think 5 lines, that's plenty of space. So I would say on LinkedIn, you're getting about the amount that I would format on a resume. So they're trying to make it like just about the right amount. And I would use that as your like, throw everything in there that you think is super high value inside that top portion. And so I think that's enough real estate. There's still that like more button, but similar to the overall structure of your resume from top to bottom, you want to come out with the big guns. So what is the biggest measurable thing that you could say at your last job that you did, right? That you increased sales by 300% by implementing a new X, Y, and Z process, right? Boom, that's your top line, right? The next one is like some other big accomplishment that you're proud of. What other skills did you pick up and learn, and how did you apply them to help the business? And so you're kind of giving sort of like case study after case study as to how, when Aaron is part of an organization, here's how the organization benefits. Boom, 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 right? And so I would, again, same thing, just prioritize most important things. That way, when you start chopping things off, if you have to sort of like economize on space, you're not losing the most important pieces, right? So that would be my suggestion. Do I know anything about Cap Gemini? I have no idea what Cap Gemini is. And I don't want to get super distracted by looking that up. So if someone wants to drop something in here that like puts me up on game, I'm more than happy to. Cap Gemini, no idea. Sounds a little Italian. Is it a cycling thing? That's Sonia. I love the thumbs up and dogs. Look at that. Look at them dogs. Steve, man, my man Steve Massa. Love having you. Lexia's got a question. Good. So, do I have any suggestions for a good cover letter? Cover letter. Nice. What are the key things you should highlight in the cover letter? So the cover letter is your opportunity to kind of like freestyle a little bit and draw on all of your skills to shape the narrative for the spots where your resume is weak, right? So you can specifically address what the job requirements are, and you can specifically say why you're the right candidate in a much more of a narrative format where you get to sort of like control, hey, I'm going to first lay out why I would be maybe the best hire that as a hiring manager you've made in your career. And here's why, X, Y, and Z. And this is why I think this organization is the right fit for me. Boom, boom, boom. And here's why I decided to transition from whatever field that I was in and put myself in the position to be able to work for your organization, so that you can tell that narrative as to why you've like not got a very deep like resume of experience. And instead it's your opportunity to sort of like, again, showcase these are the talents and the skills that you bring to the table, and here's how they directly relate. Sort of start tying it together. And if you can be short and concise and hit those bullet points, then it makes it way easier when they then look at your resume and they're like, okay, check the box. Everything on here looks normal. I'm going to give, Lexius a chance because she's told this amazing story about how she's the right fit. And I looked at the resume, looks very consistent. Let's have a conversation. That's what you want. You want suck them in with the cover letter and then check the box with your resume. Because again, you're a junior engineer. You're not going to have like, hey, 10 years of Erlang, 5 years of C++, right? You're not going to have any of that, right? So you got to rely on, hey, I'm kind of new. Here's some interesting things that I've built. I think it's kind of fun that I built X, Y, and Z. Here's my skills. So that cover letter is, I think that's where if you get the opportunity to have a cover letter, if they've requested it, man, make sure that you take that as your initial conversation, your initial engagement with the person, and really try and impress them. So suggestions for a cover letter is just be yourself, let your personality shine through, and really sort of like, okay, be an intro to like, what would it be like if you're having a conversation with someone at a little cocktail party? Not at a cocktail party where we've been doing keg stands all night, where you just on your first drink and you're super friendly to folks, right? That's what you want the vibe to be. Super friendly, but professional, and really sell why this is a good fit, which you can't do as much on your resume because it's just the structure of it is a little different. So hopefully that helps, Lexis. That's what I like to see in cover letters. I like to see someone really pulling on my heartstrings. Like, oh man, this person's got a very compelling story. I want to have a conversation with them. And it makes it super easy for me to just check the box on the resume and get the person on the phone. Michael asks, what if you want to break into the industry, but you don't want to do front end web development? What should I learn? What types of portfolio should I build? Can I give more backstory? Okay, so I don't think backstory will be as helpful yet, but here's what I would suggest. That for a lot of folks, I think because there's a fire hose of information right now out on the internet about web development, people think like that's the natural way to enter. a career as a software engineer or into the industry in general, but it's not. And it's actually one of like in the middle. If you look at like ways to get into the industry, I'd say right in the middle is web development. And just a little to the right are things that are tougher and less interesting usually for people unless they have a strong need to learn those types of technologies. And then there's things that are like much easier, but they yield like different types of roles and positions. So I'll talk about the tougher first. So you might be an individual where you're like, oh man, I love technology. I love like devices like this iWatch, right? Or a little Pebble. I had a Pebble at one point, which was like one of the first little smartwatches. And I was like, oh man, I would love to build an app for this little Pebble. And so rather than going into web development or front end development, you're just like, man, I'd love to work on embedded devices and things that are like just Internet of Things, right? How do my thermostat talk to my car, right? Very difficult to make quick progress in, and it just requires a lot of extra work, and the resources are just harder to find. So, but if that is something that you really enjoy doing, go after it, because there's a ton of opportunity in that space, and it has nothing to do with like front end web development, right? Completely different skill. A little tougher to start there, but there is an entry path. You can definitely start there. On the other side, the easier side of the business could be much more technology business oriented things like QA automation, biz development, anything else on the operation or product side of things like Scrum Master, right? So you can get into the industry, but not necessarily coding. And those could be great jobs. Software sales, customer service, all of those could get you into a company that is primarily a software company, but not doing engineering as the first role or task. So in any of those scenarios, I'd say the key on what you should learn and the types of portfolios you should build are just examples of the type of work that you want to be able to do. So if you want to do embedded systems, you probably want to like get a Raspberry Pi and start working on like edge computing and Internet of Things type projects and build out a few projects. I know in San Diego, we have something called Open Source Saturday that we're doing for a really long time. Go to one of these maker labs and, go to like an open source Saturday and get to know people in the community and start building out projects. And I think that's the way that you're going to build any portfolio. Build using examples that are the same types of technologies and the same types of things that employers are looking for, and then you'll be fine. So hopefully that answers your question, Michael. If it doesn't, feel free to shoot a more specific question or provide a little bit more context, and I'm more than happy to jump back on it and answer it. It's a big staffing and consulting company. All right, so that's what Capgemini is. I've never heard of them, so I don't know in what context that if you have a specific question around them. There's lots of staffing companies, so like Robert Half. There's a few other like pretty big national ones like Manpower, but I don't have any knowledge of that one, so it's hard for me to like give you any feedback. But Aaron says thanks. 5-6 lines. I was thinking 2 to 3. Yeah, so I think there's enough room. I think 5-6 is gonna be good. Henry Frank, here's one. If there's a job posting at a FANG company, so FANG, for those of you that might not be aware, is like Facebook, Apple, Netflix, Google. If there is a posting at one of those companies that is a stretch based on having an entry-level resume, do you think it's a good idea to still apply, or is that potentially making a bad first impression that you need to overcome in the future? Yeah, don't worry about the overcoming in the future. By the time your resume gets routed to like a human being for anyone to realize and recognize you, it will not be the same person the next time you do it. It's very, very unlikely. So I would say if you want to take a stab at it, you want to try your luck, go for it. I would not in any way think it's going to like disqualify you or discourage you. If anything, what you will learn is you'll progress quite a bit and you'll get an opportunity, or if you don't, you will probably want to back up and take 6 months or so to like decompress, learn what you need to learn, and then reattempt. It's not like you're going to attempt now and then attempt again in like 2 months. The folks that I know that have gone through the interview process at FANG companies, say that it's multiple interviews over a fairly short period of time. So it could be like 5 interviews over a week or 2 weeks, something spread out like that. And it could be challenging enough just preparing for it that it probably won't be something that you're going to want to do like aggressively right after you go through it the first time. This is my impression. Anybody I've talked to, like when they go through it, they're just like, either they get an opportunity and they get an offer, or they get so prepared because they went through that process that they get offers from other organizations and they just take one of those other offers, or they wait and then reapply like 6 months or a year later. Right. So I wouldn't worry about the first impression issue, because you probably won't be the same person. Very unlikely. Get routed to different people. Thoughts about signing up for a dedicated technical recruiter systems that they do their own vetting, like TripleByte and Vettery? Yeah, they don't work. Not for junior engineers. So it's sort of one of those like you get what you paid for type of deals. So if you think the deal seems really good and you don't have to like pay anything and you don't have to work really hard, probably not going to get great results. So the recruiters in general for entry-level roles, they are not very interested in them because there's not enough margin. And that's how they generally have their businesses run, right? So their business model is usually based on a percentage of your wage when you get hired somewhere. And that means that employers that use recruiting agencies or outside agencies, they tend to only want to pay markup and margin. They want to pay that cost of using a recruiter for talent that they feel like, okay, I couldn't get them elsewhere. So the question that I would have, all right, so if you're an individual and you're like, all right, I could go directly to this company and I could apply and they might make me an offer at 60 or 65. Do you think that same company is willing to, for my skill, pay a recruiter 85 grand to get me a job? Probably not. So there's that delta between like what the cost is going to be when there's a technical recruiter involved and like what the value is that you bring to the table. And they're usually not close enough for junior, like entry-level software engineers. Once you have more experience and once you get to like mid-level and mid to senior, now suddenly it becomes a little bit more valuable and it makes enough time or makes enough sense. Think of it just like a real estate agent, right? So if you're a real estate agent, do you want to sell in like an area where the houses aren't worth a lot? Or do you want to sell in an area where the houses are worth a lot? You want to sell luxury homes. So in this business, you as a junior engineer are valued at like a rundown condo in the worst neighborhood you can imagine, right? And you're comparing, like the recruiter has the opportunity when they're out there selling real estate, they have the opportunity to go into a neighborhood and sell luxury homes in a really nice neighborhood. So it just doesn't make much sense if they have to survive on commissions for them to sell in the hood. They need to sell where the prices are high. So that said, staffing companies, I would be very, very leery if there's anything that seems attractive to you as a junior engineer, because it shouldn't. There should be nothing about what staffing agencies are doing that is attractive to junior engineers. I know more about TripleByte than I do Vettery. So the way TripleByte works is you take a little assessment based on how you score in the assessment. There'll be fewer hoops for you to jump through for them to make a placement and get you placed. But if you don't score well enough, then you just get screened out of the process completely, and that's it. It's all over. So you take the assessment. If you don't do well enough, you don't move on. If you do really well, then you move on for a few phases. If you do extremely well, then it could be a fast couple next steps. But there's no magic to it. They just are quickly identifying people that have more skill than your average entry-level software engineer. They just ask tough questions. And if they can find a gap where there's somebody that's not working that can answer these tough questions, that's a very easy person for them to put in front of a hiring manager and actually get that $80,000 to $100,000. So the markup makes it kind of hard is I guess the gist of it. Hopefully that's helpful. I know it's discouraging to hear that there's not like a happy path where you can just talk to a recruiter and the recruiter will say, oh, you're a decent person. Let me help you find a job. Yeah, it doesn't work that way. Instead, it's like, what's in it for them? They want a commission. And it's natural because that's how their business functions. So it's not their fault. It's just like, that's how their business functions and that's how they eat is like, hey, I need to make a markup on every person I place. Because there's a lot of work that goes into that placement. Even for candidates that are really good, there's still a lot of work that they have to do. So hopefully that helps. I don't have any reason to discourage you from dedicated recruiter systems other than I don't think it's going to work. So I tend to tell people to focus on things that are the highest yield activities. So the key is like just working smarter and not harder for longer periods of time. If you do an efficient job search and you follow a lot of the tips, and you can go back and watch some of the previous, like at least the first 10 minutes of the previous weeks, a lot of that information is going to help shorten the amount of time it's going to take. And it's not intuitive. I think a lot of people struggle with like, they just apply to lots of places and they don't really have like a focused, here are the things to do and here are the things to avoid that will shorten the process. So you can try TripleByte. I can just tell you that in my experience, that hasn't been helpful for any junior engineers, any entry-level engineers that I've ever talked to. Although they've tried to convince me otherwise, and I'm just like, nope. Tried it with an experiment of students because like I don't want to frustrate my students. They were like, why don't you give this to all your students? I'm like, because I don't want to frustrate all my students and have them wasting their time taking a test if it's not going to result in opportunities for a large number of them. It's just not worth their time. They could spend that hour getting better at something else other than like being asked questions that they have no way of answering. So again, you're going to get, mileage may vary, but you're going to get, for the most part, what you put into the process if you do it in a way where you're avoiding things that aren't high yield, right? Because you can spend a lot of energy every day doing things that just aren't very productive. They're not high yield, like clicking on Indeed. You could do that all day long. You spend 12 hours clicking on apply on Indeed and yield 0 results. Or you could apply to 10 jobs a week, do a little bit of research, trying to identify someone inside of the organization that's an internal champion that could be sort of like your wing person inside, and you could apply and they could get that to the right person and you'd be on a phone screen in a matter of a few days. It's up to you. I mean, it is statistically possible for you to just click Indeed all day long for 12 hours a day, every day. And after, I don't know, 3 or 4 months, someone's going to call you. That's not a very efficient process. And if you don't do it for 12 hours a day, every day, it's going to take you even longer than that. Maybe it takes you 6 months by just clicking on apply on Indeed. 6 months of that before you get a single callback. Or you get some callbacks and it'll just be wastes of time. They're just like, oh, you don't have 10 years of experience? Oh, sorry. Click. So keep in mind. So Michael suggests not. I appreciate the answer. I'm drawn to things like LeetCode, but not very good. I'm wondering if getting really good to those problems is enough to get hired. Currently working in the Teach Yourself CS course. It depends. So it sounds like if you're more interested in algorithms and back-end code and you just don't like front-end web development, but you like back-end and services, maybe embedded devices, you like things that are a little bit more complicated and interesting, challenges to solve. Yeah, there's definitely space for that. Might want to consider data science. I'm sorry, data science and the CS principles of like data structures and algorithms that you're getting practice with on like sites like LeetCode are gonna be practical in many different directions. So those skills that you're learning there will transfer very easily into spaces like if you decide you want to get into blockchain, right? If you want to get into, or if you go not just blockchain, but cryptocurrency, right? So there could be some really good uses of that training material in those niches. And so the most important thing is like, do what you enjoy doing. So if you really enjoy working through more complicated algorithms and code challenges, awesome. Now, finding how you apply that means that you probably need to pick at least a type of technology you're most interested in, and then a sector that you'd like to focus in so that you can actually pick a few companies and actually start running down job opportunities. If you got really good at problems on LeetCode, would that be enough to get hired? Not on its own. You would also, just to be clear, you'd also need to know something about the business or space that you're in. So I'll give you an example. Marketing technology, so MarTech. So in the marketing technology space, it's really good to know like algorithms and a little bit of data science, because they'll do a lot of statistical analysis to determine how should we cluster together different demographics and populations of visitors and customers and things like that. So there'll be some statistics involved. There's potentially some tracking, but you could leave that up to the folks on the front end web team, so they could just give you all the data, and they could feed you attributes about customers and information about when events happened, and then you could take all that data and you could form meaningful reports that could tell folks, well, here's what you should be focusing more of your effort on. Maybe we should remove some of these ads and we should run these other ads instead. Or maybe we should, when we capture someone here, we should take them through this, and this process to determine what the statistical likelihood is that we've got the right customers and that they will actually buy whatever the product is. So lots of that analysis could draw on your strengths of being able to solve some of those leak code challenges. But I would say on its own, it's not as useful as having some like spatial recognition of this is how it could be applied. These are how these challenges could be applied in AR and VR, or ad technology, or ed technology, etc. So I think you need that last piece of figuring out, okay, how could we apply this on the back end through how we do ETLs, or how we do, some other analysis on the data, if that makes sense. So data science, data engineering, back-end engineering might be a good spot to sort of like consider. And then it also, like, the languages that you're using will vary depending on what languages you're familiar with. That can open up more or constrict opportunities. So good languages for data science might be like Python. Good languages for backend could be C#, Java. So that will also be a little bit more determinant than just solving challenges on leak code. Because if you told me I'm solving challenges on leak code and you're doing it in Ruby, I'd be like, it's going to be hard for you to find a job using Ruby on Rails. It would be much easier for you to find a job if you're doing it in Java or you're doing it in C#. But I don't know if that's what you enjoy. So you have to focus on what do you enjoy? What will you tolerate if you have to tolerate something for a little while? And then I would go beyond just the individual problem solving, but try and solve, because the one fallacy I think people have is when they sit and they just do leak code all day long, or they just do code challenges all day long, is they miss that when you're writing software for a living, when you're being paid to solve problems, I'd say you spend 75% or more of your time reading other people's code. So I'll say that again. When you're a software engineer on the job, you will spend the vast majority of your time, I'd say 75% of your time when you're coding, you're reading other people's code. And sometimes you're just like removing and refactoring code and like, okay, this is busted. I need to fix this now. So you got to refactor some code. You actually add value a lot of times by removing pieces of code. Like, I don't know why this got here. This makes no sense. We're already doing this here. We can remove this whole piece, just refactor this portion. So you'll spend way more time doing that than you do on the problem that you're doing when you do leak code exercises and code challenges, which is like you're solving these new, novel, very small problems where we're just trying to sort of like solve something that requires, 50 lines of code or less. When you're working out in the field, you're solving problems that require you to read and analyze and sort of like construct code paths that might be several thousands of lines long, of just the ones that you have to kind of like keep in the front of your brain as you're starting to kind of integrate your work. You don't have to keep every one of those lines memorized, but that's about how much code that you might have to like touch in order to make sure that what you're building is going to work inside of the system. So it's really important to not just drill on the small code challenges and understand syntax and algorithms, but be able to debug, be able to trace an application and hold a lot in your head about how it functions and why it functions that way. So you could be missing a big piece if all you're doing every day is code challenges. You should be working on passion projects. Figure out what those are, right? Because if they're not web development or they're not front-end web development, they should be something that's like rational. But this is the reason why I tell people, like, if you're going to do code challenges, you should be doing code challenges as an exercise where you're doing it with another human being and you're getting a chance to talk about your thought process and describe, and it's practicing the skills that you're going to use during an interview. But barring an interview scenario, code challenges are not representative of what most of your day is like as a software engineer. It is not representative at all of what most of your day will look like. Maybe a small part of your day. Maybe an hour a day you spend like really working on this interesting custom algorithm. The rest of the day is reading other people's code, trying to figure out like, why is this here? What does this mean? So hopefully that helps and provides a little bit more context about like why I don't think it's a great use of all of your time to focus on like leak codes and solving code challenges. Although I know a lot of developers that really enjoy that, the early part of their career, that sense of like, okay, I know what the defined constraints are for this problem. The number has to be greater than 0, less than 100, and I need to have this output, and I just have to write this one function that does this one thing. And it's super cool that you'll be persistent and you'll just want to solve one of those every day, and you solve harder and harder code challenges, but it does not represent what it's actually gonna be like on the job. So keep that in mind, that if you go into an interview thinking that like all that experience is going to translate directly to being able to talk through why you're going to add value to the organization, it's going to be a hard conversation. Because the very first thing I would ask you is like, well, where are some passion projects that you work on? And if you're just like, well, I just do code challenges, be like, all right, yeah, this is not going to work. Because you're only going to be super helpful for that like 1 hour out of the day, and the other 7 hours of the day, you're going to be like, I can't read all this code. Like, I have no practice doing this. Like, this is really hard. Any other questions? Got some good ones today. I had quite a few people participate today. This is pretty cool. I like this. This is what it should be like every Tuesday. I think people are getting excited because we're almost done with the Rona. I'm calling it. 2022, well, 2021 is going to be way better than 2020. 2022 is going to be even more impressive. So, all right, unless I have any other questions, like in the next, 60 seconds, I'm going to take Steve Mass's advice. I'm going to go eat some KFC, prep for the afternoon. Got a big ride this afternoon. First one back on a real bike and not my e-bike. It's going to be brutal. All right. Any other questions, comments, concerns? All right. I think everybody's good. Everybody's got homework. Brushing up on your resume. More than happy to take a look at a resume too. If anybody has a resume they want me to give you some feedback on, shoot me an email. Just be like, hey, here's my resume. What do you think? And I'll scribble all over it and scan it and send it back to you. Hopefully it'll be helpful. All right. It's been great. It's been fun. We'll do this again next week. So if you do have any questions in the meantime, feel free to shoot me an email, mike@sdcs.io, or I will see you next week on Tuesday. Later.